morning. You are watching Beyond the Headlines on Freedom Square TV, and we are reaching you from our Enugu studios because Enugu is the cool-city state of Nigeria, and it's the southeast of the country. Since the 1990s, Africa has seen waves of democratization. Multi-party systems have spread, but many countries still struggle with weak institutions, electoral manipulation, and constitutional crisis. Africa, unagreeably, hosts about 60% of the world's armed conflicts, ranging from civil wars, insurgencies, ethnic violence, to violent extremism. Of course, the Sahel, the Horn of Africa, and the Great Lakes would come to mind. Recent coup d'etat in Mali, Niger, Guinea, and Burkina Faso raised fears of democratic reversal. Where democracy is weak, conflict thrives. Disputed elections, corruption, and bad governance fuel violence. Conversely, unresolved conflict undermines democratic consolidation. Stability, development, and the dignity of African peoples depend on strengthening both democracy and conflict management mechanisms. Joining us this morning to dissect this complex subject is a man who has dedicated his life to peace building and justice reform. He's the former president of the Institute of State Mediators and Conciliators. He's a senior advocate of Nigeria, an internationally recognized arbitrator, a distinguished mediator. He has trained leaders, leading practitioners, and of course, men and women who are advocating peaceful coexistence, and civil society actors on conflict prevention and resolution across Africa. His wealth of experience makes him the right choice for today's conversation. He is Dr. Agada Elachi. Doc, good morning and welcome to Beyond Headlines.
Good morning, Chief. Happy to be here.
Yes, I should say that I'm really excited to see you. And thanks to the ongoing MBA conference in Enugu. You've been here for a couple of days. So what has been the experience in Enugu like?
Well, Enugu is, it's always a pleasure to be in Enugu. I haven't been here in nearly 2 years, but I'm happy to have come. The climate is wonderful. The people are very friendly. Of course, I have people like you who make me feel very at home in Enugu wherever I come. And I always look forward to coming back to Enugu. I always say Enugu is my second home in the East.
Okay, so how much of a delicacy did you find time to get there, but the Owa, the Okpa, and all the rest?
Well, I can assure you that I had on 3 occasions and some very good palm wine.
Okay, that's good. It's good to know you are at home. Once again, thanks for finding time out of the busy schedule to be here. The truth is, you spent a part of your time fronting and discussing mediation in Africa. You are not just a national icon when it comes to the issue of peace building, its management, and conflict resolution. How do you personally assess the current state of democracy on the continent, given that a few countries not long ago decided to go the other side of engaging in coup d'etat and having a military juntas govern them?
Well, if we talk about democracy in Africa, some of us who are academics at heart will ask, is there really democracy in Africa? Can we say that what we see the governments in Africa practice is indeed democracy? Because again, if you look at the meaning and definition of democracy, and if you look at the origin of the concept of democracy, it's alien to our African continent. It's alien to the ways we've done carried out. So I think that if I were to give an assessment of the state of democracy in Africa, I'd say that it's failing. Failing primarily because of 2 reasons. One is that those from whom we learnt democracy did not allow us to evolve and to assimilate and get used to what those principles. Most of the time, we find that democracy in Africa was imposed. Because it was imposed, the people, the African people, the leadership, the followership have never really imbibed the tenets of democracy, and so are unable to follow it and actually live it out. Even when we have elections and we have processes that would be said to be within the democratic framework, you find that those processes rarely ever come out with the kind of results that builds confidence, the kind of results that are lasting, the kind of results that are promoting of the nationhood. So my assessment of democracy today would be, in Africa today, would say that we're far cry from what democracy should be, as far as the principles of democracy are concerned.
Well, that's pessimism, almost to 90%. And that's why many argue that Africa has democracy in form, but not in substance. And they also argue that our elections are without accountability and, of course, the rule of law. Well, having said that, in the past 5 years, so to speak, we have witnessed a surge in military coups, especially in West Africa.
Yeah.
What does this say about the fragility of our democratic institutions on the continent?
Well, the problem with democratic institutions in Africa is that the institutions themselves are weak. The principles that uphold those institutions are also not based on any ideology or any proper ideology, as the case may be. Apart from the fact that they are not based on any proper ideology, even where there appears to be some sort of ideology, the key actors do not even believe in the ideology that they supposedly sell. So you find a situation where the political class has continuously behaved irresponsibly. And because they continue to behave irresponsibly, they continue to allow the concept of the coup d'etat to be promoted. At a point, I mean, for about 20 years or so, we had some sort of respite from coup d'etats. We had a situation where Africa, of course, influenced by Europe and America, seemed to have embraced democracy in its entirety. However, democratic institutions, when they are weak, and when democracy does not deliver the results to the people that it ought to deliver, what you have is you have a yearning gap. And once you have that yearning gap, then that gap, as they say, nature abhors a vacuum.
Yes.
So where the political class does not have that connection with the masses, with the people, then, unfortunately, because as Africans, particularly in Africa, of course we learn from the best, from other parts of the world, but particularly in Africa, because we've had those issues of coup d'etat in the past, now we are going back. So Africa, as far as democracy is concerned, it appears to be that we are progressive. I know that you think I sound pessimistic, but honestly, I've been, at least in my working life, for nearly 3 decades, I've interacted on different levels as far as democracy is concerned. I've had the privilege of teaching issues bordering on democracy, political culture, and all that. And what is clear to me is that we seem to be going backwards rather than going forward.
I think this last statement agrees perfectly with Bishop Kuka, who said Nigeria had made progress in reverse care. So the time was when the hospital in Ibadan, the university teaching hospital, was close to the continent.
True.
When our universities,
We had people coming from elsewhere
yes,
to get treated here.
yes, and suddenly all that are there. Yeah. But if you had asked to hazard a guess, what would you think are the biggest internal threats to African democracies? Or as they would say during the Jonathan era, the external influences. Because it was absurd to say, look, there were external pressure for Jonathan not to drop his. So, which of these would you think, or is there a combination of all these?
I think it's a cocktail of all these factors. Let's start with weak institutions. When Bill Clinton visited Africa many years ago, I think it was, no, it wasn't Bill Clinton, sorry, it was Obama. When Obama visited Africa, he got elected, I think he visited Kenya
Yes.
and Ghana. I can't remember the
Okay.
third country. I know he made a country tour. Whilst in Ghana, I think addressing the parliament in Ghana, he said something. He said, Africa does not need strong men. Africa needs strong institutions. The problem that we have in Africa, in many countries across Africa, is that we have strong men and women, as the case may be, but no strong institutions. So you have institutions that rely on individuals for their survival. We do not have the institutions that ensure that if Chief Anioke, if this is what the institutional framework is, Chief Anioke cannot go outside of that institutional framework. Of course, even though it's not there, when you talk about weak institutions, you must talk about a weak legal framework and the enforceability of that framework. So that's also a problem. Then again, a poor leadership is a given. When you have weak institutions, yes,
trouble with Nigeria.
The trouble with Nigeria. When you have when you have poor leadership begets so many things. Poor leadership begets lack of accountability. Where there is no accountability, there will be corruption. Where there is no accountability, there will be indiscipline. My car is bigger than yours. I'm above the law. And so where the rule of law does not prevail, then of course you will have problems with the democracy. And of course, naturally, corruption is a factor. External factors, will they be there? Yes. Every country has what it calls a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or, as the case may be, Secretary of State, whose job is to engage with other countries. No country can exist in the current political climate or the geological framework of geopolitical framework of the world without having definite foreign policy framework. Now, if you have your foreign policy, if you're internally you're weak, then of course the influence of an external body will always be on you. But if your internal processes are strong, if your economy is strong, if your democracy is one, if you want to call it democracy, or your governance structure is accountable to the people, such that the people benefit from it, such that the people look up to it, then hardly would external forces be able to break through. You see currently this is not necessarily endorsing what is happening in some of the countries that have pulled away from ECOWAS, but you see that in some of those countries, when the coup d'etat happened, the people celebrated. And now, the attitude of the government, led by the military in power, is such that they are saying Africa first. And because they've taken that approach, the people have been able to support them, and they are bluffing the external influence. Because one of the things I think that most African leaders seem to forget is that we have enough within Africa to find our way ourselves. Do we need help occasionally? Yes. But when the man who is helping you is offering you peanuts in the place where you can eat a full plate of food, then that's not help.
Okay, there's no doubt that in Africa, conflicts that appear to be an everyday affair. Whether it is intra-community conflict, whether it is intercommunal conflict, whether it is interstate conflict, it's still on a daily basis. And some of them have taken ethnic or religious undertones.
Yeah.
But many of them,
Unfortunately.
very sad. And again, in Nigeria, for example, the political and economic hardship, so to speak, when you talk about political hardship and economic hardship, politically because the politicians do not care. Because they do not care, they make the economy almost useless. And people, the majority of Nigerians are grieving from their experience. How can issues related to conflict be properly diagnosed? And if they are, how can they be addressed?
Okay, well, there are two things you've asked me here now. First of all, diagnosis. What are the real issues in conflict? As far as I'm concerned, as I read from my studies, unfortunately, my doctoral thesis focused on this area. The major things that divide us are not really the factors, at least on the surface. They are more of symptoms rather than the real cause. The real cause sometimes is the fact that we have lack of proper structures to make sure that the conflicts don't even arise in the first place. So, if we're going to talk about diagnosis, are the conflicts in Africa based on religion? Just like you rightly said, no. Are they really driven by ethnic differences? Not really. What most of the time is about accommodation of each other, it's about tolerance, it's about sometimes ensuring that everybody has a sense of participation. So we will not succeed in diagnosing these problems without looking beyond the obvious. And looking beyond the obvious will be to dig deep and see what are the root causes. If you go to some communities, the manipulation by politicians is really what is the reason why there's a conflict. Not because one group is Christian or Muslim. But the politicians, in the bid to be able to have their way, manipulate the differences. And this is what brings about the conflict in many of these areas. How do we address some of these issues? We can address it, for instance, by, as I proposed in my doctoral dissertation thesis, I said, peace education. Early warning, structures for early warning, which identify what could be the problem early enough so that proper intervention is made. But this is even talking about when the problem has happened. Oh, we should also think about preventive conflict strategies. And one major way of preventing conflict is to engage in peace education. Engage in deliberate efforts to ensure that the framework of government, the way government is run, the way society is structured, all is targeted at ensuring that Chief Anyoke, Agada Elachi, and any other person feels a sense of participation, a sense of belonging. One of the things that we must do is to also tell our story, share the history of our past, because we learn from the past. There was a time in this country when they were no longer teaching history. I'm happy that it's been reinstated into the curriculum.
Not even effectively.
Yeah, but not effectively. Yes. But you see, if you know where you're coming from, then you have a better appreciation of where you should go and where you should not go. So.
Okay, Doc, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be looking at the electoral system in Nigeria, electoral violence, and the frameworks for actually resolving these electoral issues. Are the legal framework strong enough? Are they actually part of the problem?
Very well.
Let's take a short break.
Not everything makes it into the headlines, but we bring you the full story. Join Uchenna Cyril Anyoke, a renowned media personality and former president of the Nigerian Publishers Association, as he unpacks the real issues behind the news, from politics to public policy, economy to human rights. Nothing is off limits. Expert guest, in-depth conversation, local and global perspective. New episode every week on Facebook and YouTube. Watch now on Freedom Square TV. Follow for updates and behind the scenes clips. Beyond the headlines, beyond the news.
You're still watching Beyond the Headlines on Freedom Square TV. And of course, we're still reaching you from our Enugu studios. And of course, my guest has not shifted a bit. He's still Agada Elachi, PhD, certificate of Nigeria, who is actually participating effectively in the ongoing NBA conference in Enugu, which is being touted as, I don't know, this is the largest, right? They say it's one of the biggest in recent times.
It's the largest conference of lawyers.
Yeah. Well, part of the challenges we have in Africa, so to speak, especially Nigeria, the electoral disputes. Whether it is the Fourth Republic, whether it is the Fifth Republic, or whichever, even in the Nigerian National Assembly, of course, there is still a rigid dispute with one of your senators that remained unresolved. And so electoral disputes remain a major source of violence in Africa, including Nigeria. Now, ordinarily, legal framework should be the last hope of a man who is aggrieved, and they should actually help in resolving conflicts. Sometimes it would appear, I'm not too sure, they are part of the problem. What's your thought on this?
Well, I think that the question, if I understand your question, you're asking me whether the legal framework is
strong enough,
sufficient, strong enough to ensure that electoral and disputes and political disputes, if I may add that, are adequately resolved. And I would say yes. We have the laws, we have the structures in place. Our laws are very clear. I'm one of those who's always advocate that our legal framework is not bad. It is the enforceability, the compliance with and the enforceability of that legal framework that is usually the problem. We have a country populated by people, and this is not only this is not exclusive to Nigeria, it's across Africa. You have a situation where people believe that they can game the system. The law is clear, this is what should be done. This person, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. Even within the political framework. Yet people disregard all of that and act with complete impunity. So the question would be, is there the courage to punish such impunity? I dare say no. And that is where we must start from. And it brings us back to the same issue we started from at the beginning of this discussion. Weak institutions. Our institutions are weak, and because they are weak, upholding the rule of law becomes a peculiar challenge. So until we're able to have institutions that do not fear face, if I may use the phrase, as we say in common parlance, then until we're able to have such institutions and enforce the law as it should be enforced, we will continue to have intractable political and electoral disputes in Nigeria and in Africa.
Many Nigerians are at a loss, if I use that for at a loss, or they're still wondering what, in what ways has the judiciary contributed to the ongoing crisis in Rivers State? There was a state of emergency, and some people have approached the court. I learned, I may be wrong, the case is lying in the Supreme Court, for interpretation. The last time I watched, I won't remember his name from Rivers. He was saying, what is holding the Supreme Court? Do they want to wait until the time elapses before they can make a pronouncement on the legality or otherwise of the action taken by Mr. President? So people are saying that legal frameworks seem to be not working.
Well, I'm not sure I'm aware of any case that is pending in the Supreme Court as it relates to the Rivers matter. The Rivers matter, I believe, was determined by the Supreme Court, which gave the enablement for the estranged members of the House of Assembly to return and all that. Post that, I'm not aware of any matter.
On the state of emergency?
Yes, on the state of emergency. I'm not aware of any matter that has gone up to the Supreme Court. If there is a matter, then it is sub judice and I'm unable to pronounce it. But I'm not aware that there is any such matter.
This again is part of the challenge you have, when you should speak on a matter, you say it's sub judice.
Well, you see, the problem is that, well, maybe if you had asked a politician, he would have had the latitude to speak. But I'm a practicing lawyer. And I also have, it's my duty, whilst owing my duty to society and to my clients, I also owe a duty to the court. And I cannot pronounce on the matter which is pending in court when the court is yet to have made a determination on it. that would be against my ethical considerations and requirements.
Okay, I'm fully aware you are a practicing lawyer at the top level. I also know you are a mediator. Sometimes I think mediation overshadows your law practice. As former president of the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators Nigeria, which arguably is the biggest, largest mediation institute in Africa, not a black. So, and you've trained many people across Africa. To the best of the knowledge, how effective has mediation been compared to litigation? Of course, military solutions in resolving African conflicts.
Oh, mediation has been fantastic. Even if I say so myself. As you know, I'm a mediator at heart. I love mediation because it gives the opportunity for us to rebuild relationships. And in many situations, we have been able to save situations that have gone to the brink. Mediation essentially is about having a conversation, frank conversation, a sincere conversation about the issues in dispute, looking beyond what the positions and the grandstanding of parties are, and looking at their needs to see how we can address the needs, the fears, the concerns. My experience practicing as a mediator in Nigeria and across Africa, and indeed globally, is that where you create the opportunity for people to sit down and have a conversation about any challenge that they have, unless the people are not sincere about resolving that issue will be resolved. And that is how, that is where mediation trumps litigation. Litigation is the ventilation of rights. There are issues that you can ventilate in court all the way to the Supreme Court, and yet you may not be able to implement the judgment. There are cases in the Niger Delta involving, for instance, some of the oil companies and host communities that went to court from 2-3 decades. There is a judgment in favor of one party, but there's no implementation. Because for you to implement, you must sit down with the parties and have a conversation. Also, military solutions essentially are important. We're not making light of them. They're important, for instance, to keep the peace. But where you want to really build peace and you want to make peace, then processes like dialogue and mediation are what you need to fall back on.
Okay. We have regional bodies. We have ECOWAS. And of course, we have the African Union. When I was in the university, that this joke about the OAU, Regional African Unity. No, the ECOWAS has also joined. But what role could they actually play? It is a subnational and a subcontinental and continental institutions. And so, what role could how could they actually help one preventing a conflict and stop just issue statement that may affect?
Well, I think that the first thing is that you must divorce ECOWAS, the intervention by ECOWAS. ECOWAS is structured along 3 tiers. You have the heads of states, body of the heads of states. You have the commission, ECOWAS commission, and then of course you have the technocrats that are involved, as the case may be. The major challenge with the implementation, the intervention rule of ECOWAS lies in the fact that even when ECOWAS deploys the best of experts, technicality and technical, those with the technical know-how and all that, if the countries where the intervention is being offered to are not sincere about allowing such interventions to take root, then there will be no success. Currently, you have elections due in a few African countries. We have had situations where ECOWAS, as an organization, which is typically responsible for ECOWAS has tried to do what you call preventive diplomacy in the name of African countries. I've had the privilege of being part of some of those delegations. And in some of those countries, when we have the opportunity to sit down with stakeholders, peace actors, and all that, we are able to have conversations prior to elections that promote and help to promote a smooth electoral process prior to the elections, during the elections, and after the elections. Sadly, some countries don't even allow that to happen. So what can ECOWAS do in that situation? So it's a case of a family member who decides that other family members should have no say in what is happening. Where that is the case, then the question would be, is it really the problem of ECOWAS, or is it the problem of those who had committed to be part of ECOWAS, and whether they are being faithful to the principles and the objectives of the institution? So if asked, is ECOWAS an effective organization? Yes. I can't speak much about the African Union. I haven't operated at that level. I've not done anything for the African Union. I've done some work with ECOWAS. Are they an effective organization? Yes. Have they done a lot of work in many of these countries to be impactful? Yes. But as you know, one of the things that we, again, from our interaction, ECOWAS continues to do is to bring about the sensitization. The people of the peculiar countries must also stand up to ask for accountability of their own. Because no matter how well they do, the ECOWAS Commission drives it. If the people do not embrace some of those basic principles and all that, if the leadership in those countries do not say, oh, this is the legal framework, this is the normative framework, let's keep to it, then of course you will not have an effective intervention by these subnational bodies.
Well, I like the optimism about ECOWAS. Even quite a few commentators will also categorize with the African Union, the toothless bulldog. Well, that said, currently there is conversation in Africa about what democracy means to an African. And they've started pondering on what they call African democracy. Is there any way it can be Africanized and adopted to local contexts? Rather than we started with the parliamentary system, we are now doing this almighty American presidential system, so unwieldy, and you have power concentrated. Just one man, the president is so powerful. The governors are emperors. Okay? And so, do you believe that there should be an African model of democracy? And if so, what would be a prescription?
I start by, my response to this particular question, I start by saying that it reminds me of the comment by I think Musharraf, former Prime Minister of Pakistan, who said that democracy means different things to different people. I don't think that Africa taking wholesale the principle of democracy as enunciated by the West and promoted by the West, we will be able to find our way out. I agree with you completely that the presidential system is unwieldy. We tried the parliamentary system, it didn't work. But interestingly, if you look at the African culture, we are more parliamentarian in our approach to things than we are presidential in that approach to things. And I think that African scholars, particularly our political scientists, I'm not a political scientist, I'm a student of politics, but not a political scientist. You are the political scientist. I think that those of you who are the experts in this area must design for us an African concept of democracy. One which takes into cognizance for instance, look at within our structure. Our current framework has it that our leadership structure in the past was emirs, chiefs, and so on and so forth. That's what we had. That's the way African society grew. In some communities where they didn't have chiefs, they had body of elders, sort of like a parliament, who took decision on behalf of the people, who made sure that there was equality and so on and so forth. We scrapped all that and we adopted the processes given to us by the West. We need to look inwards and see what we can design, how we can design it. The Chinese do not, they have I don't know whether you can call what they do democracy. But they have a system that ensures that not just anybody can end up in government. And so I admire that system because the system thrives on merit. You cannot just get up in the typical political democratic sphere that we have, anybody can get up, run for office without any pedigree, without any background, without anything to show for what they have done in the past. The populist approach to democracy, I do not know if it is working for us, but I think that we must design something that is African-centric. We can abide some of the basic principles that promote accountability, promote integrity, promote the participation by the people. But whilst doing that, we must also design other safeguards to ensure that we are not just taking what the West is throwing at us.
I'm sure you have heard about the word diet as propounded by Nnamdi Azikiwe. That's the form of civilian military leadership. A lot of Nigerians in particular are beginning to think that it's actually the way out, where you have that hierarchy. Would you, by any standard, make that a prescription?
No.
And why?
I don't think that the role of the military is very clear. If you have proper structures, institutions, the military is also part of the institutions of governance. They have the security aspect of governance. If a military person has served in the military, retires, and wants to participate in active politics, why not? They can bring their discipline, their mindset, their background to bear on the process. That is okay. But to say that we have a situation where the structure of leadership is shared between the military and this thing, I do not subscribe to that as an individual. What I subscribe to rather is a structure of leadership that recognizes a balance between our core traditional ethics and the ways of governance that our forefathers promoted, and of course, some of the modern principles. I think a marriage of these two will help us much more. If we do that, even within the traditional system, if you recall, we had the military were part of the governance. In places like I think is it Ife or you have the Ariel Nakatanfo, who was the head of the military, was part of the cabinet of the district. Even in times past, you've always had the military as part of the structure. Even if you had a monarchy, they were relevant to the process. They supported the process, but they understood the boundaries. Once we can delineate these things properly, I think we should be able to operate better.
Well, Dr. Elachi, student of Nigeria, you have a wealth of experience, first in the legal profession, and two in peace advocacy, mediation, negotiation, and the rest. And that is what they call the brain economy, the knowledge economy. It's actually ruling the world. But sometimes we discover in Africa, our leaders who emerge are lacking in basic leadership training. But if you have the privilege to talk to African leaders, maybe a workshop, maybe a seminar, what key steps, 1, 2, 3, or 4 key steps would you recommend to strengthen democracy and reduce conflict across the continent?
I think the first that I would say is, so at any gathering of African leaders, if I had the opportunity, is to ask them to think for tomorrow. I think the greatest problem with the leadership that we have across Africa today, Nigeria inclusive, is that nobody is thinking about tomorrow. Everybody is thinking about now. I came into Enugu and I saw everywhere it says tomorrow is here. Very fantastic slogan. Because if you think tomorrow is here, then you will do the things to ensure that tomorrow is properly taken care of. If African leaders can focus on the fact that they need to make sure that the future is safeguarded, then they will be accountable to their citizenship. So accountability is key. They will be considerate of the citizenship. One of the major challenges of Africans, when you look at the West, I mean, the West has they have their own problems. But there are certain things that you don't see happen in the West, for instance, is you do not see it. They still have corruption. They still have abuse of office, but you do not see them take it to the point where the consideration for the other man is completely wiped off. There must be a consideration to the fact that if I'm in position and I've been given position, I have the sovereign wealth of the nation under my control, I should be considerate of the future generations. If I'm in charge of education, for instance, I should be looking on how to make sure that the institutions for education can be there beyond the next 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, rather than try to give contracts that benefit me in the short term. So African leaders need to look to the future. That's the greatest thing. If they can do that, they will be accountable, they will promote integrity, they will promote citizen participation. Because I cannot plan your tomorrow for you without carrying you along. And that's also another problem that we have. We have governments building roads where there is no need for roads, building bridges where there is no need for bridges. Overhead, it's become very common to see state governments try to build overhead passes and so on. Those are sometimes not the real issues. We've seen, in some cases, state governments building airports where there is no need for airport. Maybe the immediate need is how to empower the people, empower the human resource, make sure that the people, there is greater education. Because, as you said earlier on, brain power is what is ruling the world. If we can invest in human resource.
Okay, I won't let you go if I don't touch two world conflicts. And that will take me to Russia and Ukraine. That will take me to Israel and Gaza. These conflicts have raged on and on and on. And there have been attempts, whether it's negotiation, whether it is mediation, whether it is executive mediation. Trump had tried to do executive mediation, and it has not worked. Again, you internationally traveled to, and you are conversant with international mediation and all that. So, what do you think, one, are the reasons why this persists? Is there not enough trade mediators, or the parties are unwilling? Or, if you look at Russia and Ukraine, and then you look at Israel, not even with what happened a couple of 2 days ago, where Israel bombed one hospital and 5 journalists. In fact, I let them, almost 100 something journalists have lost their life in the conflict. So what would be a panacea for all that, and how do you think best those conflicts can be solved?
I think that first of all, my view is this, and it may not be a popular view, but my view is that the leadership of the world have not been sincere with themselves in addressing those conflicts. And unfortunately, where many leaders of the world and many countries are playing ostrich. And sometimes it's because they feel far removed from it. They are not directly affected by it. You know, it's easier to see somebody else's house on fire than when yours is on fire. So I think that the major thing that needs to be done is for the world leaders to take the bull by the horn, call a spade, and address these issues. Also, the key actors have not demonstrated, in many cases, sincerity of purpose. Because if they are sincere, and this is not putting the blame on any particular side, it's the blame is on all sides. Because of that lack of sincerity of purpose, we are faced with a situation where one day we take 2 steps forward, and then the next day we take 10 steps backwards. I think that leaders like Trump and others who are trying to midwife the settlements here must also be careful with some of the statements they make. I think that more backdoor diplomacy needs to be done in dealing with these particular issues. There's too much being said in the media, which is, rather than help the situation, is worsening the situation. I still believe that there is no issue that a conversation cannot be had about. And that brings me to the final comment is, sometimes maybe the use of the social media has also added to the problem. Because some of these things aggravate rather than douse the tension. So overall, all actors need to be sincere about how this issue will be resolved. I need to be ready to shift ground, because in any resolution of issues, if parties are not ready to shift ground, there will be no resolution.
Thank you, Dr. Agada Elachi, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, for your insights. I'm particularly taken by this backdoor diplomacy. You just posited that in Ukraine and Russia, Israel and Gaza, there's too much talk. They should try to do what you now refer to as a backdoor diplomacy. And on that, I want to say thank you very much for finding time to be here.
Thank you for having me.
And we do hope that when next you visit Enugu, you still be our guests. And to our viewers, well, this conversation does not end here. It continues right on our Facebook and on our YouTube. And you can do that by using the hashtag at Freedom Square TV. Until same time tomorrow, have a lovely day ahead of you.